Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's the weekend, y'all. Hope you guys have something fun planned. We are having a soggy day here. It's just the last little gasp of Tropical Storm Nicole coming through the area. So my thoughts are with everybody in Florida who was impacted by it. I think it kind of hit pretty hard there. So hope you're all doing well in that area. Real quick, want to give a shout out to Candace, Debs, June, Donald, Hash Brown, Carol, Shanta, Tracy, Carolyn, Becky, Ashley, Virginia, Kay, Terry, Jennifer, Mary, and Bobby for your donations. I really do appreciate it, guys. I also want to give a big shout out to the Patreon perk subscribers. If you're new to the show, I do have a Patreon, but I don't do any bonus content. It's just sort of a gathering place. And then I do a live every week for them over there. I need to do a live for everybody. It's been a really long time since I've done a live, but we'll get to that soon. And want to say a big thank you to all the veterans out there who have served our country. My grandfather, Papa Mac, was a World War II veteran. And I love these photos of him. It's just such a moment in time looking at these pictures. That's my great-grandmother on the left there. And my dad's dad, Papa Mac. Such a handsome guy. He died when I was 5. I do remember him, though. He was a tall guy and just really sweet. So, yeah. So thank you to all the veterans. It's a very selfless thing to do, to dedicate your life to this country. So I'm very grateful. And music fact of the day before we get started, people who have not won Grammys. This was very interesting to read. There were a lot of names on this list I would have never guessed. Diana Ross, Katy Perry, Snoop Dogg, The Beach Boys, Queen, Dean Martin, and Jimi Hendrix are just like a smidge of the really, really famous and amazing artists that have never won a Grammy. Most of them have been nominated, but never actually won. So that was interesting. So it's been a really busy few weeks in the George Wagner trial. I mean, really interesting couple of weeks between Jake and Angela testifying and now the wiretaps. And last night, my brain was just sort of mush. And I was like, why did they put that one audio on there? And you guys all reminded me, it's a really good point that just went way over my head, which is that last audio that they played where George is talking about moving and getting this farmland is just driving home the point that it disputes the defense's stance that George really wanted to get away from his family. And I get that now. I'm kind of glad we had a break today. It's a little bit much covering a live trial sometimes when it takes, 12 hours to do notes of 8 hours of testimony and then condensing that to an hour. But man, we've grown in subscribers. So I just want to welcome all the new listeners. It's great to have you here. A lot of fun discussions going on everywhere. And I'm really bad about getting back to my messages right now, but I will get to them. Hopefully some this weekend. I am planning on just chilling out a little bit and go visit my Grammy tonight, hang out with her. My youngest will be home. My teenagers, of course, they have their all big social lives now. So I see them pretty much in the morning and at night, which is, I guess, how it should be. So, all right, let's hop in. I really have been surprised really with Wagner. And if you're following this and have been following it since the early days, as the years went by and information sort of trickled out, it was kind of building the frame for what we're seeing the big picture of now. And the wiretaps to me, guys, was almost as intriguing as Jake and Angela's testimony because it gave so much insight into the inner workings of this family and really just how distorted their perception of everything was and how warped their way of thinking was and just everything about them. It really was so enlightening to hear in their own voices how they interacted. And then just surprising too, that you never got the feeling that anybody was remorseful about anything. It just was all poor me, they're attacking us. And yeah, so it's just been a very interesting couple of weeks. The defense picks up on Tuesday, no court on Monday. It's an administrative day. The prosecution will submit all their evidence. They'll have that hearing where the defense, I totally expect them to ask for an acquittal, saying the state hasn't proven their case. And I expect the judge to say, see you tomorrow. So we will pick back up next Tuesday where we left off. But Chad Daybell had a motion to sever hearing this week. His attorney, John Pryor, said that Chad's defense will be drastically different from Lori's and the trial should separate. Again, just more reading of the tea leaves that the honeymoon's long over and Chad is fending for himself at this point. As we know, Lori's case is on hold yet again. There was a hearing this week. We don't know the outcome of it because obviously it dealt with her mental health. So Chad's defense attorney, John Pryor, said to Judge Boyce, our version of the facts of this case will differ greatly from what Ms. Vallow and her legal counsel are going to be presenting. Our defense is diametrically different than Ms. Vallow's, and the cases need to be separated. He said that statistically, men are sentenced to death more often than women as well. He also said he wasn't happy with the next Netflix documentary, The Sins of Our Mother, that was just released not too long ago, saying there was a documentary done by Netflix that portrayed this case in a way I don't necessarily agree with. They talked about the allegations of what Ms. Vallow was allegedly involved in down in Arizona. I'm going to be petitioning the court to allow me to use a certain amount of information as it relates to Arizona. So, of course, the state doesn't want the severance, saying that the evidence is almost identical against both Chad and Lori, and severing the cases could result in inconsistent verdicts. The efficiency of the courts and the resources of both the government and witnesses. They also point out the trial is expected to last 10 weeks joined. So obviously separating, you're looking at a minimum of 20 weeks of trial. And that's when Lori goes. We don't know the results of this competency evaluation. I checked this morning. She's still in custody in Madison County, but that could change at any moment. And I've always said, at what point does this sort of separate on its own? Because you can't hold Chad back forever for going to trial. I hate it for the families because it is just two separate trials that they're going to have to sit through and relive this double. If these cases are severed, I don't know that I see an option at this point, though. I just really feel like it's going to end up in sever itself. So the prosecution did suggest the option of having separate juries. And if one set of evidence did not apply to the other defendant, that jury could just leave the courtroom while that evidence, this very specific to the one defendant, is being presented. Not a bad idea, actually. In the motion by John Pryor, which was initially filed in September. This is the second or third time he's asked for this. Of course, every time has been denied. He said the courts and federal courts have made a habit of separating capital cases when death is on the table. So Judge Boyce asked if there's been any admission of guilt by either Lori or Chad, and Prosecutor Blake, as well as Defense Attorney Pryor, said they did not know of any. So he's going to rule at a later date. And I guess probably we'll see what the results of what's going to happen with Lori before he rules. I don't know. I just feel like either he's just going to deny it right now and kind of let the dominoes fall. We're not going to be at trial at least probably till October of next year for Chad and Lori, if not just Chad. So we'll keep an eye on it for you. I think things will be quiet in the case for right now anyways, until we get an official determination about her competency, and then we'll know what's up. So some JonBenet Ramsey news. It's crazy because December 26th will mark the 26th year since the body of 6-year-old JonBenet was found in their basement. And Boulder investigators, get this, I mean, this is just so much. They've investigated leads that came from more than 21,000 tips, letters, and emails. They've interviewed more than 1,000 people across 19 states, and they have reviewed more than 1,500 pieces of evidence and analyzed almost 1,000 DNA samples over the last 26 years. I briefly met her dad at CrimeCon in Vegas. He was there as a speaker. So in a joint press release, the city of Boulder Police Department, Boulder County District Attorney's Office, and the 20th Judicial District announced just this week on Wednesday that they will consult with the Colorado Cold Case Review Team next year on her case. So the team is just composed of professional, investigative, analytical, and forensic experts from all across the state of Colorado. They meet 2 to 4 times a year, and they still have a small amount of DNA from the crime scene. The problem is that amount is so tiny that testing it could consume that, and you don't want to do that. You know, I watched an episode of Forensic Files 2, which I love Forensic Files. I've seen every episode of like the original. Now they have part 2, which is much more updated with more current methods of investigation. It's fascinating stuff, where they had a partial DNA profile and they sent it to some really fancy lab. I believe it's out of the country. And they were able to kind of create this whole DNA profile from that partial and solve a cold case. It was very interesting. You think with the technology we have now, what could they do to duplicate that DNA? I don't know. I'm not a DNA expert, but it's interesting. So in that press release, officials from Boulder said whenever there is proven technology that can reliably test forensic samples consistent with the samples available in this case, additional analysis will be conducted. Her dad is making a big push to have the DNA tested. And her half-brother, John Andrew Ramsey, he and JonBenet shared the same father. He was in Atlanta at the time JonBenet was murdered. He's been really outspoken against Boulder police, especially recently on his Twitter, tweeting out an article about a cold case from Denver that was solved, saying it's a shame the Boulder PD won't consult with a more experienced Denver PD about the case. And then just last month, also tweeting out, if you haven't noticed, I got an issue with the Boulder police. They maliciously and wrongly defamed my family and subverted justice by not searching for the killer of my sister. I will hold them accountable. Otherwise, I'm a pretty amicable guy. If you see smoke, it's incense, y'all. My house is not on fire. I just noticed up here you can see some smoke. So John Andrew has joined his dad in campaigning to have the DNA testing using newer and much more advanced technologies than what was available in previous years. So it'll be interesting to see. That case has always fascinated me how, I know there was a lot of controversy about how the crime scene wasn't secured and a lot of things were done wrong, but still it's one of those cases that I really personally don't have really any idea what really happened. I don't know. I know there's a lot of speculation over the years, but I'm not convinced on anything in that case, to be honest. I do remember that really weird guy that admitted to it. Now it's time for our paid sponsor of the week, Everlywell. This year, you can prioritize what matters most when you share the gift of health from Everlywell. Choose from at-home lab tests like food sensitivity, women's health, or men's health, or vitamins and supplements because love and health are all you need. Everlywell is digital healthcare designed for you with personalized results and accessible tools for long-term health. With over 30 at-home lab tests and high-quality vitamins and supplements, you'll be able to find the perfect test for you or your loved one. The women's health, food sensitivity, and celiac disease screening tests are only a few of the options. Here's how it works. Everlywell ships products straight to you or your loved one with everything needed in one package. If you ordered an at-home lab test, the sample can be simply collected at home and shipped back to a certified lab in the prepaid envelope included with the test. Digital, physician-reviewed results are sent straight to your preferred device in just days. If you ordered vitamins and supplements, you can start adding them to your daily routine right away. It's so simple. Over 1 million people have trusted Everlywell to support their health and wellness goals, and now you can help your loved ones do the same. I took the food sensitivity test, which measures your body's immune response to 96 foods to help guide you on what types of food to prioritize in a 2-part elimination diet. The gift of health has never been so easy to share than it is this holiday. For listeners of Pretty Lies and Alibis, Everlywell is offering a discount of 20% off an at-home lab test at everlywell.com/whattheworld. That's everlywell.com/whattheworld for 20% off your next at-home lab test. That's everlywell.com/whattheworld. And I believe he was incarcerated for a while, but it ended up he just confessed and really had nothing to do with it. Just weird. So moving on to Kaitlin Armstrong, the judge in the Kaitlin Armstrong case will not throw out that police interview that Kaitlin gave when she was first brought in on the misdemeanor charges just a day after Mo Wilson was found murdered. I was kind of worried about all this because, you don't want this thrown out. It's little things like that can really mess up a case. But Judge Brenda Kelly said the interview was not unconstitutional. Judge Kelly said there was no evidence of any intentional disregard for the truth and says there was still probable cause to arrest Kaitlin. Her attorney said that investigators used information in that very first interview on the misdemeanor charges. Remember, she skipped out of a Botox bill. They arrested her with that misdemeanor charge, and then they thought the birth date was wrong on the arrest affidavit. It was really right, but they let her go. She flees, and all that mess went on for 40-something days. Right now, she's currently scheduled for trial in June of next year, and that's kind of the latest on that. I know we've been following that pretty closely. So Debbie Collier, just this case gets so in my head, and then I can't even begin to fathom what happened here. It's such a bizarre case and very sad. I always look at pictures of her and see she has such a sweet little smile, but her daughter, Amanda Bearden, was on the podcast Crime on the Record. And her theory and her belief is that her mom killed herself. She said that Debbie had started giving her personal items and had taken a week off of work before she disappeared, which was not like her, and was doing things in the weeks leading up to her, I'll just say death, but I do think it was murder. That seemed weird in hindsight. She said nobody saw Debbie that Friday, and she didn't talk to her mom the next day that she disappeared. She said Debbie was dealing with things she didn't want to burden Amanda with and was depressed. She said the last time she saw her mom, Debbie had tears in her eyes and would not tell her goodbye. She also said there are key things her mom shared with her that leads her to believe this was a suicide, but at this time, she doesn't want to say those things publicly. And I just learned this. I don't know how I missed it, but sometimes when you're doing live trials, you just really get behind on things, little details. In fact, a couple of updates I'm going to do are a little older, but today, finally just sitting down, I found some things about like Orrin and Orson West, by the way. But the $2,385 Venmo transfer that was sent to Debbie, from Debbie to Amanda shortly before her death was initially seized by law enforcement, but that has since been returned to Amanda. And last Friday, it was announced that the FBI has joined the case and was assisting investigators. So I don't know, y'all. There's so much about that case that just doesn't sit well with me, but I'll wait for law enforcement to make things a little more clear. All right. Moving on to Richard Allen, the Delphi murderers. He said at his arraignment that he was looking into hiring his own defense attorney, but now, right before he was transferred into the Indiana Department of Corrections for safekeeping, he wrote a handwritten letter to the judge asking for help in getting a public defender. So the letter says, in the case listed above, I, Richard M. Allen, hereby throw myself at the mercy of the court. I'm begging to be provided with legal assistance in a public defender or whatever help is available. At my initial hearing on October 28th, 2022, I asked to find representation for myself. However, at the time, I had no clue how expensive it would be just to talk to someone. I also did not realize what my wife and I's immediate financial situation was going to be. We have both been forced to immediately abandon employment, myself due to incarceration, and my wife for her personal safety. She has also had to abandon our house for her own safety. What little reserve there is will fail to even maintain the original residence. Again, I throw myself at the mercy of the court. Please provide me whatever assistance you may. Thank you for your time in this in this most urgent matter. Sincerely, Richard M. Allen. So Libby German's mom, Carrie Timmons, spoke to Inside Edition saying she's still shocked about the arrest, saying it just came out of nowhere. She learned of the arrest from Libby's grandmother, who called to tell her someone was in custody, but she didn't know who they had at that time. Not too long after that call, the lead investigator in the case called and identified Richard Allen as the suspect to her. She said, if this turns out he is the killer, how did he go unnoticed for 6 years? And she said now she just has more questions than answers than before. She said she always thought the killer had to have a local tie with Delphi, but did not expect the suspect to be living among them, which I'm sure for everybody in that community, it has to be just eerie and shocking and scary and all those things you can imagine. She personally had never seen Richard Allen before, but some of her friends and Libby's grandmother had. As we know, she was printing off photos for the funeral, and Richard Allen had been the one to check her out and actually refused payment for the photos. So in earlier interviews with the U.S. Sun, Libby's mom said she had lost her faith in law enforcement and didn't know if the case would ever be solved in her lifetime. After the arrest, she said her mind hasn't changed her perception of how law enforcement has handled the case, saying if they have in fact caught this guy after 6 years with him living under their noses, then what were they doing all this time? That's all I'm willing to say right now, but this could have and probably should have happened 6 years ago. It makes me sick. Obviously, it's all alleged, but it's rather disturbing. He was just there this whole time. She said the arrest also has her reliving the murders, but she feels they're at the beginning of the last chapter in this, but she understands it's a long road. She says she'll always wonder what Libby would be doing now if she were alive. And in fact, Libby would be almost 20, which is crazy. So moving on to Casey Anthony. She's back in the news. We all know she was accused of murdering her daughter, Kaitlin, back in 2008. And she had the really publicly sensationalized trial in 2011 where she was acquitted. And I didn't know this, but over 40 million people watched the 6-week trial at some point. I mean, it's right up there with OJ. So Peacock, which is an app that NBC has, they're premiering a 3-part series with Casey Anthony starting on November 29th. And the director of the series, Alexandra Dean, said in a statement, since her acquittal in 2011, public opinion of Casey Anthony has been largely shaped by the media convinced of her guilt. What emerges over the course of multiple interviews recorded over 6 months is a startling psychological portrait of Casey Anthony and a complete narrative of what she says happened to her daughter, weighed against multiple sources of potential evidence. I believe the result will surprise many and cause the American public to look at this story in a new light. She also says, Casey, Lord have mercy, y'all. I need a nap, by the way. I just laid in bed till like 3 o'clock this morning. It wasn't like anything was going on. It's just one of those nights, you just can't go to sleep. And then you look at your clock and you're like, dude, I got to be up in 3 hours. And so I'm going to take a little nap after I get my daughter before I go see Grammy. But she also said that Casey had zero control over the production and she couldn't even make suggestions. So this is the first time she's spoken publicly in 11 years. Personally, I'm not interested in it, to be honest. I've seen mixed reviews from listeners who say, yeah, well, I'll watch it. But a lot of people really are not interested in this. It was a crazy case, guys. It was one of those that's one of the cases that makes me nervous when I'm waiting on a verdict. But if I remember correctly, some of the jurors gave interviews later, much later, who said that the prosecution simply overcharged the case. And based on the evidence presented, they could not charge her. So anyways, a little update on Orrin, Orson, West. These little cutie pies, I'll tell you what, they have had my heart since we first learned about this case. But the trial for their adoptive parents, Trezell and Jacqueline, was delayed until January 30th. It was actually scheduled to start last month, and I just missed it covering Wagner. But as we know, Orrin and Orson were reported missing on December 21st of 2020, but investigators believe the boys were actually murdered 3 months before they were reported missing. And unfortunately, their bodies have not been found. But the judge granted the request to postpone after a filing by the defense saying that they're still receiving evidence in the case, including thousands of pages of records from cell phones and computer data. One of Jacqueline West's attorneys says she also has gotten DNA evidence as well as body cam footage to go through. So they've never revealed how they think the boys were killed. And there's a gag order, so very little has come out about this case, but it's one of those that sticks with me. Just the fact that nobody missed these kids for how long? Nobody. And we see that with Harmony Montgomery. And, then I think about Summer Wells. It's just all these missing people. Dylan Rounds. There's just so many unanswered questions about people who have seemingly just disappeared off the face of the earth and nobody knows anything. Justice a lot of times is delayed, but rarely denied. So hopefully some things will come out. A little update about Barry Morphew. It's been quiet about him too, but the charges against Barry, as we know, were dismissed on April 18th of this year. His attorney filed a motion back in May to have his seized property returned to him, saying in the filing that there's no link between the property to the location or circumstances of Susanna's disappearance. They also say he has no charges pending related to her disappearance at this time, and the state responded saying that the people have a claim to all property seized for use in a future prosecution. Further, no hearing need be held as the people are not looking to forfeit the property. To the contrary, we wish to hold it for safe for a potential future prosecution. That request was denied by the judge, so they keep Barry's stuff. And man, that's another one that just obviously charged him too quickly for a successful prosecution. But their excuse at the time was that they thought they knew the location of her body and they were waiting on the snow to melt. We're about to go back into winter. It's probably cold as all get out in Colorado at this point. It's just another one of those cases where, when is there going to be a break? Quinton Simon, just unfortunately, no news in the search for his body, but the Chatham County Police are putting a stop to protesters who've been outside the home where Quinton was last seen. They'll begin enforcing county ordinances to remove protesters, and they're using the parade and public assembly ordinance as well as loitering. So the search was actually suspended yesterday in the landfill for Quinton's body until Sunday due to Tropical Storm Nicole. And the family put up a big YouTube, a banner of a YouTuber that's been covering this case. I really just saw that right before I started this. I'm going to look into that a little bit. But those are some of the updates that I wanted to get out, and just keep an eye on these things and try to keep everything current. So next week, I think it'll be interesting to see what the defense is going to put on the table for Wagner and what kind of witnesses and where they're going to go with it. People have asked me, do I think George will testify? No. I really don't, because that leaves him open to cross-exam, and not, if he's smart, he wouldn't even think about it. And I'm sure his defense attorneys have told him we're not doing that either. So, and then people had asked about, could Billy be called to testify against him? And I think there's kind of a battle between the Fifth and Sixth Amendment rights of both of theirs. And I'm not sure about the legality of co-defendants. I think they can choose to testify, but I don't think they can be forced to. But if you're legal and know that answer, let me know in a comment or something. Also, I'm looking for something different to cover once Wagner ties up. I think maybe a couple of weeks at most, maybe we'll be finished with this case. So if there's anything coming up in mid-November through the first of the year, let me know. I'm always interested in covering what you guys want to hear about. And I plan to do this for Alec Murdaugh coming up in January, that double murder trial. It's a fascinating case. A lot of things have been released lately. I'm going to actually do some binging this weekend and stay on the couch a good bit. So I'm going to check up on that HBO miniseries they put out about the case. I got a Dateline to catch up on. So yeah, if there's any cases that are about to go to trial you want me to cover, please let me know. Because I think if everything goes according to plan, Murdaugh should go in January. His attorneys really want this trial to get going. So hopefully that'll go off in January. All right, guys, I'm out for the weekend. We will see you soon. If you're on Patreon, we're going to do a live Sunday night. And if not, I'll see you guys maybe Monday. Not sure yet if I'm going to take a long weekend since there's no court Monday. If I do come on Monday, I think I may dive back into the Valo Daybell Mega Series. We're getting towards the end of that. So I'd like to finish that up soon, at least before the first of the year, and have that one all finished, at least for now. Much more to come in that case and all the cases we follow. You guys have an awesome and safe weekend, and we'll see you Monday or Tuesday.